Hey, it's Adrian, and today I have the brand new Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 6. So I'm just going to take a quick first look, let you know of any changes compared to the Z Fold 5, which I have here, and you can decide if it's worth the upgrade for you or not. So let's get started. The box comes with the Z Fold 6 Quick Start Guide, USB Type-C to Type-C charging cable, SIM eject tool. I have the Z Fold 6 in this silver shadow color, so it's a matte type of finish that almost acts like a gradient when light hits it. Now if I put my fingers on here, which are a little bit oily, I can see a little bit of residue on there, but definitely not as much as on the front glass. So I have the Z Fold 5 at the bottom here, and one of the quick ways to identify them is that on the Z Fold 5, the corners are much more rounded, but on the Z Fold 6, it's a much more boxier and squarish looking design. The camera housing is a little bit different on the Z Fold 6, so the rings around each of the lens looks a little bit wider than on the 5, but the flash unit remains exactly the same. And taking a look at it from the side, so they both look like they protrude out at about the same height. Button placement and size remains pretty much exactly the same. And taking a look at a top view, again, all of the ports are pretty much the same except the speaker grill. It is much narrower and not as thick on the Z Fold 6. And this is something I noticed when I reviewed the Z Fold 5 and 4. It seems that speaker grill just gets smaller with every generation. And looking at the other side, exactly the same in terms of where the SIM card is held. And at the very bottom, exactly the same again, except the speaker grill is narrower and not as high. There's a dual SIM card tray plus eSIM. With the Z Fold 5 on top of the Z Fold 6, we could see the corners jutting out a bit because of the squarish look. However, if I take a side view, I could see that the Z Fold 6 is a little bit shorter in height than on the Z Fold 5, and the Z Fold 6 seems to be a little bit wider than on the Z Fold 5 when laid on top of each other. The hinge also looks slightly narrower on the Z Fold 6, making it less thick, and we also have the Samsung logo etched on the hinge. The Z Fold 6 also closes much tighter when folded, and you could see if I move this light on the Z Fold 5 at the bottom, you could see a lot of the light coming through. However, on the Z Fold 6, much less light is making its way through. In terms of hand feel, even though the corners are a bit more squared off on the Z Fold 6, it still feels just as comfortable as when I hold the Z Fold 5. Looking at the front screen on both phones, so you can see on the left side here, this is a fairly wide bezel. And if we look at it on the Z Fold 6, the bezel is almost non-existent. So the usable screen space on the cover screen is a little bit wider than before on the Z Fold 5. However, I still find it not as wide for my liking. I still find that I would have to open up the phone instead of just using this cover screen. It's still challenging to type. And I've seen a lot of comments online where people prefer this narrower front screen instead of having it wider like on competitor brands. But let me know what you guys think. I definitely would prefer if it's wider. That way I can always use it without using two hands to open the phone up if I'm somewhere where it's not super convenient to do so. And here's how it sounds when you close both phones. So Z Fold 5, Z Fold 6. So the Z Fold 6 sounds a little bit louder when closing. The Z Fold 6 is also a little bit stiffer when closing the phone, and that's probably because it's brand new and I haven't really used the hinge that much. And compared to the Z Fold 5, it's a little bit smoother once you get past the halfway point for it to close, just because I've owned this for much longer. You could definitely see the crease on both phones when the screen is off. Now, I can barely feel it on the Z Fold 6, but it's definitely there. And on the Z Fold 5, it's more prominent, but I would not say it's a reason to really upgrade to the Z Fold 6 unless it really did bother you on the Z Fold 5. Now, once the screens are turned on both phones, you could still see it there, but it's definitely way more prominent on the Z Fold 5. The Z Fold 6 comes in at roughly 243 grams, and the Z Fold 5 comes in at 256 grams, so a roughly 14 gram difference. And the S24 Ultra comes in at 234 grams, so it's pretty impressive that the Z Fold 6 is just marginally heavier than on the S24 Ultra. The under-screen camera is still fairly prominent when the screen is on or off. The speaker grill at the top of the cover screen is also more pronounced than it was on the Z Fold 5. So to recap, the Z Fold 6 is about 1.2 millimeters thinner than on the Z Fold 5, and it's also about 13 to 14 grams lighter. The matte finish is also a bit more resistant to fingerprints because you could see on the hinge I'm leaving kind of a lot of fingerprints on the finish here, whereas it's matte all the way through, but not really any type of significant design changes. The battery capacities and charging speeds remain the same on both phones, and that goes for the camera modules as well. The only notable changes are that we're running the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 on the Z Fold 5 and the new Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 on the Z Fold 6. We also have a brighter screen at a max of 2600 nits on the Z Fold 6 compared to 1750 on the Z Fold 5. All versions of the Z Fold 6 come with 12 gigs of RAM. However, on the Z Fold 5, if you got less than 512 gigabyte storage capacity, it was only 8 gigs of RAM. We have that super bright AMOLED screen now running at 2600 nits peak brightness and is just as fast and fluid as on the Z Fold 5. Another thing you'll notice if you're coming from a slab phone is every time I go into one of these settings, like say modes and routines, I have to go into one of them and then click back to get out. However, on the Z Fold 6 or Z Fold 5, when I go into modes and routines, it just opens it on this other column here. So I actually don't need to click back. I can just cycle through each of these and see everything at once. So it's much more efficient and quicker to make changes. On the Z Fold 6, there's an option you won't find on the S24 Ultra, and that option is called Screen Layout and Zoom. Now, if I tap into that, it's set to multi-view, and that's where I have these split columns. Now, if I go into standard view, I'll give it a second for the UI to change, and now it's going to act exactly like the S24 Ultra now. I can also go ahead and make this larger in terms of the screen zoom, so I'll just set that right now. But if I go back here, you could see now I'm in display. I have to go back out and I have to go into each of these items one by one, like on S24 Ultra. So this is actually great because if you have a difficult time seeing phone screens, even when you're using something as large as the S24 Ultra, well, you could use the Z Fold 6 and just make it super large and easy to navigate through. I'll leave it on multi-view since I prefer that, but you can see as I adjust screen zoom down, I'll be able to see much more information on the left side than if I had it all the way up. Right now I'm in Spotify. This is the layout. Now what if I wanted to just kind of navigate here, pick a song, and then close the phone? But if I look at the front screen here, it's not continuing Spotify on the front. Now the way to fix that is we're going to pull down, go into settings, and then we're going to search for continue. And it says continue apps on the cover screen. We'll tap on that and make sure that this option is turned on. So I'll just go down into Spotify right here. And now when I go back into Spotify and I close the phone, it's going to continue it on the cover screen. And a huge benefit of the large screen is being able to use things like remote desktop so that while I'm away from home, I could just go ahead and monitor whatever I have on my computer using touch controls. And if you have a handy mouse like I do, I can also go ahead and use that to go ahead and remotely manage my computer. And here's what YouTube looks like on the Z Fold 6. So fairly big layout. You can see a lot at once. Now, once you tap into a video, of course, you have the default layout, and then you could read through comments. What you can also do is go ahead and fold it, and that's going to give you this flex mode. So you can see once it's normal like this, this is the layout you have. You have videos on the side here. You can take a look at the comments, but as soon as you fold it, it puts you into this flex mode. And from here, you can pause video, skip ahead. And the benefit of this is you don't actually have to touch the screen. Say you had it sitting down like this while you were eating. You're not going to rock the screen. You could just use the touch controls right at the bottom here. Now there's also a flex mode icon at the bottom left. If you tap into that, you get access to some more quick controls. So you can see this opens up a kind of touchpad and you have a mouse pointer going around there. You can also go ahead and take a snapshot right from here. We can also go ahead and slide down the notification panel right here. So you're never really touching that top screen. The other thing we can do is tap on these three buttons. We can change the display brightness, volume, and settings. And lastly, we can do split screen. So I can just go ahead, tap right on here and pick one of these apps. So I'll just pick Chrome here. So I could just be looking at a website while I have a YouTube video playing at the top there. So pretty handy in terms of functionality. Note that I have up to 10 different apps showing at the bottom, so it makes it really easy to just switch between apps effortlessly. And of course, I could tap on this icon to see all the apps that are installed. Now, the way to get that is under Show Recent Apps. I've turned this option on, and I have it set to show up to 4 apps. So everything to the right side of this vertical line is going to be those 4 recent apps. Now I can just go switch into Spotify, but one really cool thing is note that this icon here shows YouTube and Chrome vertically stacked. And if I tap on that, that's exactly the layout or split screen layout I had saved when I showed YouTube. So it actually remembers window configurations or layouts. So that makes it really easy and effortless to keep your work kind of on the screen and to switch between different apps. And if you like to cycle through various social media platforms, you could just have them all living at the bottom here. You can go through YouTube, X, Instagram, TikTok, etc. How about if I'm listening to music on YouTube, I like what I'm hearing, I want to buy this CD or vinyl, well, I'll press and hold the Amazon icon, drag it in the corner. And what if I want to check out concert dates? Well, I'll press the Chrome icon, drag it down there, and I can take a look at Ticketmaster. And if I want to get more information, well, I could just call. I'll drag the call icon into this pop-up feature here, and I have all of that going on at once. Now from here, what I can also do is I could tap on this icon here, and I can actually change the opacity on here so it's not as prominent with whatever I'm doing. And I can also drag this around with the handles. The other thing I could do is I can kind of pop it right here. Let's go right there. I could pop it in there, even though it's not natively meant to do that, I'll just pop it out. And then the other thing I could do is I could just kind of have it floating around, and then whenever I want access to it, I can easily just tap and make a call. So the amount of flexibility and customizability on here that Samsung gives us with One UI, that is actually quite impressive. And to get that functionality, you sometimes have to go into Labs under Advanced Features and enable this option called Multi-Window for all apps. And this will force apps to act in a multi-window even though they weren't natively coded or designed to do so. The fingerprint sensor is also lightning quick, just like it was on the Z Fold 5. And it doesn't matter if the phone is in the folded orientation or unfolded, it still works just as quick. We have the same 50 megapixel wide camera, 12 megapixel ultra wide, and 10 megapixel telephoto. The front camera is a 10 megapixel wide camera, and the under display camera comes in at 4 megapixels. Both phones have the same option. So on the Z Fold 6, we can switch from 12 megapixel to 50 megapixel. And if we go into the image aspect ratio, everything is the same except we have 5:6 on the Z Fold 5 and 6:7 on the Z Fold 6. For the video settings, the aspect ratio is also a little bit different. So we have 5:6 on the Z Fold 5 and 6:7 on the Z Fold 6. And if we go into the frames per second, they're exactly the same. 8K at 30, UHD at 60 and 30, same for full HD, 60 and 30, and then HD at 30. The camera UI is also much better on the Fold phones than on the Ultra. So we have this capture view here, and what it's going to do is as I go ahead and take photos, you can see I'm getting a live preview of every photo that I take. And in that way, I actually don't need to check focus, like to go into my gallery. I can see it in real time. The other thing I can do is just fold the phone up like this. And again, I'm getting that same type of camera view at the bottom here. And it's also much more stable holding the phone this way. I can also just set it down kind of like a makeshift tripod and take photos. And here's a look at some of those photos. So you can see that comes out very sharp, pretty good saturation for just really quick snaps. And let's review that video. Now I did start panning really quickly. So once I do that, I'll press and hold to slow the footage down. Here we go. And this is one of the really neat features where you can kind of slow it down into slow motion and let go. But yeah, everything is really sharp, nice colors, you know, right out of the box. While you can take a selfie with the under screen camera there or the one on the front, you may want the rear camera since they're a higher megapixel. So you could turn on this option, cover screen preview on, and that way whatever the rear cameras see, you'll be able to see it on the cover screen. So you can use this for taking, you know, higher resolution selfies, or you can use these for group shots or group photos where everyone can kind of frame themselves without you telling them to get into place. Once again, I don't know how Samsung's done it, but even though the speaker grill is much smaller on the Z Fold 6, the bass performance, the frequency range just sounds a bit more expansive. Here's a listen again. So on the Z Fold 5, the sound sounds a little bit thinner, a bit more tinny than on the Z Fold 6. So I think I'm going to wrap the video up there for now. I just wanted to do kind of a quick first look at what's different on the new Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 6 compared to the Z Fold 5, and I really don't think there's much of a difference unless you care about it being, around 14 grams lighter, about 1.2 millimeters thinner. There's really not much else that makes this a worthwhile upgrade. And as much as Samsung is pushing, the AI functionality, I just don't think it's polished enough for mainstream use. However, do stick around because I will be putting the Z Fold 6 up against the S24 Ultra in a variety of areas such as, camera performance, gaming, thermals, and so on, also battery life. So do stick around for that because that's going to be, a more helpful review if you're considering upgrading to the Z Fold 6 from the S24 Ultra since they are running the same processor. And stay tuned because I'll also be reviewing cases for the Z Fold 6. I have a couple from Spec, I have the official Samsung case, some third-party cases, and if you learned something you didn't know before while I went through the menu settings, check out my tips and tricks video because there's much more to learn in there. And if I can ask you a huge favor, if you did find this video helpful, please consider liking and subscribing. It really does help me out a lot since Samsung does not send these phones out to me. I get them later than all the other top reviewers, so it really does help me out a lot if you could show your support and love.